The snow was falling harder now, thick and fast, blanketing the forest in a heavy silence. All you could hear was the faint, desperate sound of a child crying. Her sobs were soft, barely escaping into the frozen air, choked by cold and fear. She couldn't have been more than 5. Her tiny hands were turning blue where the iron shackles dug into her wrists, binding her to a frost-covered pine tree. Her boots were soaked. Her legs trembled. The wind cut through the trees like a scream, sharp and merciless. And just a few feet away stood a woman, arms crossed, lips pursed, her breath curling into the air in perfect white puffs.
Calm.
Cold. Unbothered. She was trespassing, the woman snapped, her voice slicing through the air. You people never follow the rules. The little girl whimpered. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed into the snow. No one came. No one spoke. Until, finally, a distant hum broke the stillness. Faint at first, then louder. A low rumble beneath the forest floor. Lights, red and blue, flashed against the trees, cutting through the storm. Boots crunched in the snow. Radios crackled. Step away from the child, a voice barked. The woman turned, startled for the first time. Her expression froze. And the little girl blinked, snowflakes clinging to her lashes, as hope flickered behind tear-filled eyes. Somewhere behind the chaos, a father screamed her name into the wind. But it was already too late. The damage had been done. The cameras were rolling. The SWAT team had arrived. And the truth, every twisted, chilling detail, was about to explode across every screen in the country. 3 days earlier, everything felt normal. Or, at least, what passed for normal in our quiet, suburban cul-de-sac. Our neighborhood always looked like a snow globe when winter arrived. That morning marked the season's first real snowfall, and my daughter, Emma, had woken me up just after sunrise, already dressed in her oversized pink jacket and rainbow boots, practically vibrating with excitement. Emma loved snow. Not just playing in it, living in it, like it was her element. We built a lopsided snowman, made snow angels, and I pulled her around on a sled until my arms were jelly. It was one of those rare mornings where time doesn't matter. No emails. No meetings. Just a dad, his daughter, and the kind of peaceful joy you don't realize is rare until it's gone. But even then something felt off. Across the street, behind the frosted windows, someone was watching. Not overtly. Never overtly. But you feel it. The weight of someone's eyes. The judgment. The quiet suspicion.
Karen.
She never said much, and when she did, it came dressed in fake concern and tight smiles. Just making sure everyone's following community safety rules, she'd once said, after warning me about Emma's tricycle being too close to the sidewalk. Karen had a clipboard, a laminated badge from the HOA, and she wielded both like federal credentials. At first, I didn't take her seriously. Why would I? She was obsessive, sure. Annoying, definitely. But dangerous?
No.
At least, that's what I told myself. I figured if I ignored the notes, tolerated the passive aggression, she'd get bored.
Move on.
But she didn't. She watched. Always. Whether it was Emma spinning in the snow or me scraping ice off the driveway, Karen was there. Behind that window. Taking notes. Taking photos. She once reported us for leaving our Christmas lights on past 10 p.m. Another time, she emailed the HOA because Emma had trespassed onto the communal forest, yes, the same forest behind every house. Nothing ever came of it. But each incident left a mark, like tiny cracks in a windshield. And eventually it shattered. It was the 3rd morning after that first snowfall. Emma, chasing a bunny into the woods behind our yard, laughing like the world was made of magic, had no idea what was waiting for her. But Karen did. She had planned it. It started small. A note about garbage bins. Then the mailbox, apparently 1.5 inches too tall. Then our fence. The flower beds. Emma's bubble machine. Even our Halloween decorations.
Too spooky, she said.
Each time, I assumed it was the HOA. But no, it was just her.
Karen.
She wasn't elected. She wasn't even appointed. She simply showed up one day at a board meeting with a binder full of violations and declared herself the HOA Safety and Compliance Liaison. She invented the title, and no one stopped her. Neighbors shrugged it off. That's just Karen. But she didn't stop. She escalated. Phone calls, emails, photos, surveillance. She once reported us to animal control over a stray kitten Emma had fed on the porch. She recorded everything, documented Emma playing, tracked what time our porch light turned off. And when I confronted her, respectfully, in the middle of the street, she just smiled. It's nothing personal, she said. Order matters. If you let one person bend the rules, everything starts to fall apart. Her tone was eerily calm, robotic. She truly believed she was the hero. Then came the WhatsApp group, the Neighborhood Standards Task Force. She added people without asking, shared updates, photos, anonymous reports, passive-aggressive posts about family values. And some neighbors played along. Emma, of course, had no clue. She was 5, always barefoot, always singing. Our backyard was her kingdom. The forest line? Her favorite place. She called it the magic path. Then one morning, she came in crying. The lady with the camera yelled at me. She'd wandered too close to the woods again. Karen had screamed at her about trespassing. I went over that afternoon to clear the air. Karen didn't open the door. She spoke through her ring cam. The community forest isn't a playground, she said. Your daughter's behavior is dangerous. And illegal. The next day, we got a formal warning.
Emma,
A 5-year-old. Had been officially cited for unsupervised minor encroachment. I stared at the letter in disbelief. That forest had always been shared land. No signs. No fences. But Karen had claimed it through fear. She built a case.
a file,
A binder. Photos. Maps.
dates, times.
Half the pictures were of my daughter. And Karen was convinced, utterly convinced, that Emma was a safety hazard. And then came that morning. I stepped inside for coffee. Emma giggled and ran toward the magic path, chasing a squirrel. Karen made her move. The shackles. The snow. The chain that I wanted to be the first one to step into that fresh snow. I was exhausted, completely drained from the work week, and if I'm being honest, Karen had taken whatever energy I had left. But Emma? She had that glow on her face. That kind of joy that makes all the hard stuff worth it. So I helped her into her puffy jacket, zipped it up to her chin, adjusted her wool hat with a floppy pom-pom, and sent her out into the yard, boots on, mittens ready, like a little soldier marching into winter. She had barely made it halfway through building her snow fort when I stepped back. Inside to make a cup of coffee. I left the sliding door cracked open just enough to hear her humming some made-up song about snow bunnies and magic castles. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. I should have noticed how the humming stopped mid-note. How the world fell strangely silent. Then I heard it. A sharp voice cutting through the quiet, like a slap. You are not allowed to be in that area. That is restricted HOA property.
Karen,
I dropped the mug mid-pour. Hot coffee splashed across the counter, but I didn't care. I ran to the door, flung it open, and stepped into the bitter cold. There she was, Karen Whitmore, standing at the edge of the wooded trail, her signature beige parka zipped to the chin, clipboard in hand like it was some sort of badge. Her phone was raised, camera pointed directly at Emma. My daughter stood frozen in place, confused, her mitten-covered hand still holding a chunk of snow. Karen, I shouted, stomping through the snow toward her. Put the phone down. She's 5. Karen didn't flinch. She's trespassing, she said, calmly, like she was reading off a shopping list. That path is not for recreational use. It's clearly stated in the HOA Winter Guidelines, Section 9.4c. She was following a squirrel. I snapped. She's not building condos back there. Karen's face didn't change. If anything, she looked satisfied. She lowered the phone but didn't back away. I've documented at least 6 instances where she's entered that space unsupervised. The ground is uneven, icy. There are roots and debris. It's a liability waiting to happen. I've submitted a report to the board. My fists clenched inside my pockets. She lives here, I said through gritted teeth. That's why we bought this house. To be near nature. You can't draw imaginary lines through a shared forest. Karen snapped back, her voice finally rising. Share doesn't mean unregulated. If you won't take action, the HOA will. For a second, we just stood there, snow falling between us like a curtain. Emma had backed away, closer to the swing set, unsure of what to do. Her little eyes flicked between us, red from cold and confusion. We're done here, I said, forcing my voice to stay calm. Karen gave a smug half-smile. I agree. For your daughter's safety, I sincerely hope you understand the seriousness of this situation. I guided Emma back to the porch, brushing snow off her hood. She looked up at me and asked, "Did I do something bad?" "No, sweetheart," I whispered. "You were just playing. That's not a crime." Inside, I locked the door. My hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the anger bubbling beneath the surface. I wanted to believe it was over. That Karen had gotten her little power fix and would retreat back behind her blinds for a while. But it wasn't over. It was just the beginning. A few hours passed. Emma had warmed up, sipping hot cocoa and watching cartoons. I stayed near the window, my eyes drifting to the backyard every few minutes like I was waiting for something. Though I couldn't have told you what. The snow kept falling, blanketing the morning's footprints in a fresh white layer. And then the doorbell rang. It was Tom, a neighbor from 2 houses down. He looked uneasy. "Hey, you might want to come outside," he said, eyes darting toward the street. "Something's going on?" I rushed past him, coat half-zipped, boots barely on. As I rounded the corner and looked toward the tree-line, my stomach dropped. Karen was out there again. But this time, she wasn't holding her phone. She was holding a metal chain. Emma stood about 10 feet ahead of her, right at the edge of the woods, facing away from the house. She looked frozen in place, literally and emotionally. Karen's posture was rigid, her voice sharp. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language screamed, command, control, judgment. I ran. By the time I reached them, Karen had already looped the chain around the trunk of a pine tree. It clinked and tightened like something out of the Middle Ages. She reached toward Emma's wrist. "Don't you dare!" I screamed, my voice cracking with panic. Karen turned, startled. "She keeps violating boundaries," she hissed. "This is for her own protection. I warned you." I warned the board. I pulled Emma into my arms, stepping back like I was shielding her from a wild animal. "You need help," I said, breathless. "You chained a child. You literally brought a chain outside and tried to trap a child in a snowstorm." She could have wandered off. Karen shouted. "What if she fell in the creek? What if someone took her? This community is full of negligence. Someone has to enforce safety." I could barely hear her anymore. My pulse was pounding. Emma's tiny heartbeat raced against my chest. Then I noticed movement at the street. People were gathering. A neighbor holding up their phone. Another pointing toward Karen. And in the distance, the wail of sirens. Karen froze. Completely. As if the approaching sound of justice snapped her out of her self-righteous trance. Her eyes darted. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "You did this to yourself," I said quietly. She stood there, chain still dangling in her hand, a piece of damning evidence that didn't need an explanation. Snow kept falling, soft, peaceful, absurdly serene against the madness of what had just happened. Then, through the haze of white, the blue and red lights appeared. The forest was no longer silent. It was a crime scene. And this time no HOA clause could save her. The road was still dusted in fresh snow when it all happened.
Fast.
Officers in tactical gear arrived, clearly responding to what must have sounded like a possible child abduction. They didn't ease in. They moved with purpose, voices raised and command sharp. "Everyone step back," one shouted. "Where's the child?" I held Emma tighter, one arm wrapped protectively around her, the other raised to show we were safe. "She's here," I called out. "She's okay." But she hadn't been okay 10 minutes ago. One of the officers met my eyes, then looked past me to the chains still dangling from the tree. Then to Karen. She stepped forward, her voice high and cracking with urgency. This is all a misunderstanding. I was enforcing HOA protocols. That child. Ma'am. Drop the object and step away from the tree. It wasn't a request. Karen hesitated for just a moment, but the authority in that voice cut through whatever delusion she was clinging to. She dropped the chain like it had burned her hands. An officer moved in, questioning me. Another pulled Karen aside. I didn't hear what she said. I was too focused on calming Emma, who was hiccuping through quiet sobs, her face buried deep in my coat. In the middle of all that chaos, someone asked if I wanted an ambulance. I shook my head. I just wanted to go home. But even then, I knew nothing about home would feel the same again. Not after watching my daughter chained like an animal. Not after witnessing firsthand how far someone's thirst for control could go. This was never about safety. It had always been about power. And now it was over. Or so I thought. Sirens wailed louder, rising and falling like waves crashing against the quiet snow. Red and blue lights flickered across rooftops, reflecting off icicles like jagged glass. When the Swat van screeched to a stop at the end of our cul-de-sac, half the neighborhood had already gathered, half-dressed, in robes and boots, gripping their phones, holding their breath. It all felt surreal. Like we were frozen in a moment that didn't belong to real life. The back of the van swung open. 6 officers stepped out, moving with precision. Guns lowered, but hands ready. Eyes scanning, radios murmuring. "We've got a confirmed juvenile," one muttered. "Report says she's chained to a tree. Approach with caution." Body cams blinked silently, recording everything. I stood there in the open. Emma clutched tightly in my arms, afraid that if I let go, she might disappear. Her sobs had softened into hiccups, but her face was still pressed into my coat, refusing to look at the world. A lead officer, mid-40s, calm but sharp, spotted us first. "Sir, is that your daughter?" I nodded. I could barely speak. He motioned to his team. "We got her," he said into his mic. "She's safe. Not injured." Neighbors stepped back, making room. But no one stopped filming. Then they saw the chain. It still hung from the tree like a noose, half buried in snow, the metal cold and cruel. The loop that had gripped Emma's tiny wrist was still bent inward. An officer knelt beside it, lifting it gently with gloved hands. It was no longer just a symbol of madness. It was now official evidence. Karen stood nearby, stiff, lips twitching into something that might have been a smile, or maybe a grimace. Her clipboard was clutched tightly across her chest like a shield. She scanned the officers, the crowd, desperate for someone to save her from what she knew was coming. "I called," she said too loudly, too cheerfully. "I called because the child was in an unsafe area. I acted to prevent harm." "Ma'am," the officer interrupted, "did you chain this child to that tree?" Karen hesitated.
Barely.
"But enough." "It wasn't permanent," she said quickly. "It was symbolic. A deterrent." "Symbolic," the officer repeated. "You physically restrained a minor. Are you telling me you brought a chain out here and locked it around a child's wrist for symbolic purposes?" Karen's voice cracked. "I didn't mean harm. I was enforcing HOA rules. She was trespassing. There's wildlife. Ice." "You're not law enforcement, ma'am," the officer said. "You're not her guardian. You have no authority to restrain a child." He didn't raise his voice, but every word landed like a hammer. Karen stepped back, almost slipping. Her eyes scanned the faces around her, hoping someone, anyone, would defend her. But no one did. Even the quiet neighbors, the ones who always waved and walked on, just stared. Some held phones. Others just stood there, stunned, silent, angry. 2 officers approached her from behind. "Ma'am, we're going to ask you to come with us," one said. "We're conducting a full investigation. We need your statement. Please place your hands."
What?
"Are you arresting me?" she shrieked, voice rising like a siren. "We're detaining you for questioning. You can explain yourself at the station." They turned her gently, but firmly, arms behind her back. The cuffs clicked shut, quiet, but final, like a gavel.
She didn't resist.
Not really. But she kept talking, kept trying to explain, to spin. You don't understand, she insisted. I was trying to help. No one listens. I did everything by the book. But no one believed her anymore. As she was escorted toward the cruiser, the crowd began to shift. The silence morphed into whispers. Then outrage. She left notes on my door, someone muttered. She told my kid he couldn't ride his bike, another said. Even her next-door neighbor just shook his head. I thought she was just annoying. A young mother holding a toddler stepped forward. She could have killed that little girl, she said, pointing at Emma. In that cold, with that chain. If no one had seen it, she didn't finish. She didn't have to. The lead officer approached me again. Sir, you're going to want to press charges. We'll walk you through it. CPS will follow up, but from what I've seen, you've done everything right. I nodded, held Emma tighter, and, for the first time, let myself breathe. The officers bagged the chain. The crowd began to disperse. Phones now filled with footage of something they'd talk about for years. Karen, self-declared protector of the neighborhood, had finally crossed a line that no one could ignore. Justice hadn't come in the form of fines or warnings or clipboard threats. It came in boots crunching snow, in body cams capturing every truth, in a siren's wail that shattered the silence. And for the first time in a long while, our little forest was quiet again.